Hello, who's from Wolverhampton? Hey, yeah, well done. Yeah, where are you from? Where are you from, lads? Whereabouts? Yeah, Milton Keynes. So you come quite a way. You all right? I'm from Essex, and I'm called a museum curator, but I prefer to be called a heritage officer because I don't do the standard things in a museum. I like to get out of a museum and use assets of the place where we live. So my presentation is really about that. And I come from a place called Thurrock, which is in Essex. Do anybody know Essex? Yeah, good. Lakeside Shopping Centre, Dartford Tunnel, places like that, Tilbury Docks. And it's very industrial, a bit like, I suppose, Birmingham, but it actually has a huge amount of historic assets, buildings, landscapes, and museum. The name of Thurrock actually means the bottom of a boat where the bilge water collects. Is that a good name for a place? And in early English, Thurrock meant a dung heap in a field. So the reason I say that about the place is that we actually have old language, which we still use today. We use Anglo-Saxon, we use Roman language. So these are aspects of museum work you have to put up with. And of course, we're proud about our area. And what the museum does is it goes out into the communities of Thurrock. We have something like 150,000 people living in the districts. We have 15 villages and towns. And my role as the heritage officer is to use history to promote the area and to remind people about how proud they should be about where they live. Are you proud about where you live? Yeah? Yeah? Are you proud about where you live? Yeah, good. So it's a standard museum in a 1970s building. We have a gallery of artifacts. We've got 1,500 artifacts on display every day. We have 20,000 objects in the collection, old things. We have 50,000 pictures of the district from 1860 to yesterday. So we go out and we record things. And we have about 25,000 visitors a year come into the museum. So we're quite active. But the sad thing is, I'm the only person there. I'm the museum and heritage officer, and it's my role to keep the museum open and to entertain people. But I not only entertain people in the museum gallery, I also go out a lot. So, of course, we've got schools come in. You've been to a museum, you've been to Birmingham Museum, was it? Yeah, doing Egyptians. Have you ever been to a museum? Yes? No? Do you remember what, you haven't been to a museum? Well, most schools do go to museums and learn subjects, areas. So I have everything from a Paleolithic hand axe, which is 400,000 years old, to quite modern things, Victorian, Edwardian, Second World War, and even 1950s, 1960s history of the place that we operate in. But there's no point doing anything unless you can be a bit theatrical and maybe you have to dress up. So sometimes I might put a uniform on and I have a school group to do the Second World War. Or I might have an industrial group of people because we have a huge dock where ships come in along the Thames at Tilbury. So I often work with older people who worked in the docks. And again, you have to sort of entertain them, you have to do active things to keep them amused. I also have a community which is quite old. Do you know what old people are like? Do you know what they do? They forget. They forget what they've done in the past. It's called Alzheimer's. So I actually work with disability groups who have lost their memory, and I actually use objects from the past to remind them about what life was like in the 1940s. So these older people really enjoy coming to a museum, but I'm actually doing sort of like health work in a sense. Of course, I work for a council. They actually pay for the museum. So I always try and think, oh, how can I work with my council about doing things promoting the district? We're a huge area that's been regenerated. That means new industries coming in. So I like to work with the council and say, well, actually, we had old industries here. Shoemaking was one thing we had. We had the old docks here. Lots of big factories. Any of you ever eat flora margarine? Flora margarine, you ever had that? Come on, some of you have. That's made where I live, in Thurrock. That's the big factory there. So we look at history of the past, and then we say, well, what are we going to have here in 25 years' time? Think about the future. What do we want to have in our district? Sometimes I try and align the museum to national events. Have you ever studied Black History Month? Done any events at school, Black History? Yeah? So we're iconic because Tilbury, the docks, is where the first immigrants arrived from the West Indies. It's the start of modern British Black history. So every year we go down the docks, we put on events, we do exhibitions, and we try and encourage and remind people about not that long ago when a new wave of new people arrived in our country. Some people say that history is rubbish, and I use it the other way around. Because do you have rubbish bins in your houses? Do people come and collect it every day, every week? There's an old rubbish bin at the front here, dated 1965. Look at my 3 bins behind. What's happening today is we're generating more rubbish than we did in the past. And that's a problem of modern society. But again, I can use the museum object, that is dustbin is in my collection, just to reflect how things are changing as we go on to history. I believe very strongly in working with people with disabilities. So we have people who are blind, Alzheimer's, people who lost their memories, and many other disabilities. And we try and collect objects which relate to that, which is often very difficult. There's a man who lost his leg in the Second World War. That's his crutches on the left-hand side. He had his leg blown off in the war. And we try and remember the problems that people have trying to survive in our modern society with those disabilities. Ever heard of Night in the Museum? Seen the film? Yeah? Every night I have to go in the museum and put the dinosaurs away. Believe that if you want to. But we do actually promote things like Night in the Museum. We have 200 children arrive. We give them all a flashlight, a torch. We turn the lights off in the gallery, and they wander around in the dark looking at all the objects. We don't do anything extra. We just turn the lights off. And kids love it. Do you think you'd like to do that? As was introduced, I'm an archaeologist. As a schoolboy, I was 9 years old, I got a chance to go on a dig and start to find Roman pottery and things like that. And that's what stirred me to think, I'd like to work in a museum. So I now go out to schools and we do archaeological digs in the playing field of schools, and we teach the children how to organise an archaeological excavation, health and safety, how to identify objects. On this particular school dig, within 1 minute of cutting the grass to dig down into the ground, the children found a worm. And you wouldn't believe how much interest a worm causes. Yeah, I was trying to do history, but when we found some 17th century pottery, some glass and other objects. So it's really exciting to show children. Would you ever like to be archaeologists? Yeah? Do you watch Time Team? Time Team on TV? That's a programme about archaeology, so you can do that. I also have volunteers. So even if you don't think ever that you might go and work in a museum, you can volunteer and help out. Maybe a museum or an old building, maybe you want to get involved and support them. So volunteering is one way that you can start to get an interest in history, archaeology, and then maybe progress into a career at university, college, or somehow get a job within the heritage sectors. I go out a lot. I go and give talks, 50 talks every year to clubs and societies. So I have to learn to stand up, learn my history, present it in a nice and interesting way. Sometimes I do guided tours around old buildings. Maybe sometimes with schools, your age, take you out, show you the history of a fortress in our area, or sometimes with older people. It's still all the same. You need to learn the history. You need to be able to tell it in a lively way, exciting way about the past. Any of you ever been guides? Ever guided people around your school or things like that? Yeah, good, yeah. So you're starting to learn those skills of how you deal with people and how you communicate. One thing I do in my district, because most people think that my district is just an industrial area, is we put these plaques, these heritage plaques on walls to interesting people who have lived in the area. I don't know if you know any of these. Do you know Dracula? You ever seen a Dracula film? Well, if you read the book about Dracula, it says he lived in Purfleet, which is one of the towns in my district. So we put a plaque up. It's a bit of a joke, but the other one is perhaps a bit more interesting. Benjamin Franklin, anybody know what he did or what he invented? Yeah, go on. What did he do? He discovered Do you want to phone a friend? Anybody know what Benjamin Franklin? Shout it out. He discovered electricity through lightning. And he came to my district to invent lightning conductors, which we put on the ends of buildings. So we put a plaque up to remind us about him. He's an American, came here. Sometimes I put plays on. Actually write a play about the history of the place. Have you ever written a play? Yeah, or played in a play? Have you ever been an actor in a play? Well, we do that and we try and make it lively because it's a lovely way for people to understand about history when they see it presented in an interesting way. This is in Tilbury Docks in an old railway station, talking about the Victorian life of Tilbury Dock and as it developed. And sometimes we get involved in other national events like film location events, because lots of films were made in the district. For the last 100 years, cameras have been there taking films for big blockbuster films and for documentaries. So I have to study all these films. All these films that you see on there were all made partly in my district called Thurrock, including Batman Begins, which is one of the big ones. Also have 15 other heritage groups who operate in the district. So it's people who look after old buildings. They're generally volunteers, and my job is to advise them, support them, link them, and promote them, so they have an interesting time. And quite often I work with the BBC doing filming, documentaries, so I have to be, again, very confident about what I say and learn about things and get involved. Don't be afraid to stand in front of a camera or in front of people. Learn those skills because they're skills you can use throughout the whole of your life. Anybody recognise this lady? Some of you might. Charlie Dimmock. She's a gardener, famous TV gardener, and she did a programme and she said, oh, will I come and tell her about the old fortress down here? So I now love gardening, of course. And sometimes you have to do funny stunts. Our district was flooded in 1953. The whole of the Tilbury town was flooded. So every year on the day it floods, we put an event on. So instead of just putting an exhibition on, I sat in a rowboat talking to people, and as they walk past, they go, do you know, I remember 1953, I remember what happened down here. And then they tell you a story, an actually golden memory that we collect stories and reminiscences. But you've got to trigger the memory by doing sort of stunts. I write every week in our local newspaper. Another way of promoting your history of your place. And also, I run a reenactment group firing guns all around the country because our district has got 2 forts where the soldiers used to live. So it's a great way to encourage and remind people about who lived there, the garrisons, the army units that were there. They were mainly Royal Artillery, so we go around and we fire our guns, make lots of noise and tell people about the past. So I think I'm a bit of a Doctor Who in some ways because I'm always living in the past, but I'm also very aware that we're in the modern world. We've got to relate the museum to the place where you live, make it lively, make it active, and get involved. So I really would encourage you, if there are colleges or you're thinking of a career in history, there's lots of aspects, education, drama, interpretation, museum curator. These are all jobs you could do in the future. Any of you interested in carrying on and thinking about the museum world? A few of you? Yeah? All right. Thank you very much. Great.